Hello, this is Chuck Ridgway, Automation Technology Manager at Horner. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday live stream. We've got a great topic for you today. Here it is. IEC 61131 logic programming in Cscape 10. Now at Horner, we pride ourselves in giving our customers options. What language would you prefer to use in your control applications? Ladder logic? Maybe IEC 61131. Well, Cscape, which is our all-in-one programming software, offers both, so you get to make the choice. Now today, we've got a real treat. One of my colleagues, John Seymour, is going to join me, and he's going to make the case as to why he thinks you should be using IEC 61131 in your next Horner project. So we'll be welcoming in John shortly. But before we do that, let's break down today's topic. Today's breakdown is simple. We're going to go through with John one by one all the different factors and advantages that he sees with IEC. We'll have plenty of examples as we go through those, and then we'll have a little demonstration at the end. All right, let's get going. Okay, today I've got a real treat. I get to interview, it's really not more of an interview, more of a conversation with one of my favorite people, a guy I've worked with for, 30 years now probably, maybe more, Mr. John Seymour. How are we doing today, John?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, so one of the things, there's a couple different things, but one of the things that John and I talk about a lot when we're not talking about stereo systems and audio bits and all that sort of good stuff is we're talking about using IEC and Cscape, or really promoting IEC and Cscape more, because John is a huge IEC proponent, and he is somebody who's going to make the case today for why you should be using IEC and Cscape. But John, before we dive into that, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. I first started using Horner product in 1985 when you came out with products for the GE Series 1 PLC. So it's been 39. Next year will be 40 years I've been working with Horner product. I've been using Cscape now for since sometime in the 90s. And switched over to IEC somewhere in the mid-2000s.
Awesome. So again, I've mentioned the fact that John is a huge IEC proponent. He's going to make the case for IEC today. So let's go ahead and get started. You ready, John?
Yes.
All right. So let's start with just kind of a macro view of this really cool spreadsheet file that John has. I kind of call it John's IEC cheat sheet. And John, I assume this has a couple different purposes. One is it kind of is something you can hand your customers, and it's also something you can use to kind of refresh your own talking points when you're introducing it to them.
Yeah, correct, because there's so many advantages to IEC that sometimes you may forget a couple.
Absolutely. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to go through point by point and have a discussion about the advantages that John sees to IEC. Okay, so we're going to get started. One of the first things on John's spreadsheet is he really likes the drag and dropping of variables. Talk about that a little bit, John.
Well, dragging and dropping of variables is what is common in most modern PLC programming packages. It's the generic IEC packages that just have the drop-down list or smart list. And you don't lose that in your IEC. You can drag and drop variables. You can also double-click on the function, the contact, the coil, the operand, and also have a smart list appear to choose your variable that way. So you have both. That's perfect. But when you're using the same variables over and over and you need to drag them on top of operands or contacts, there's nothing easier. You still have your copy and paste.
Right, that's the beauty of it, right? You get more choices. It's not like you're restricting, you have to drag and drop. If you want to drag and drop, you can. If you don't have to. I would also think that if you have a large monitor or maybe duplicate monitors, it might be a real advantage also. If you have your variable list, really enlarged in one area of your setup and then have access to all your variables quickly.
Yes, and the fact that you can sort that list in any way you want.
Correct. Alphabetical order you created them, however you want to sort them. Very cool. Okay, so dragging and dropping was our first point on John's spreadsheet. The next one is the ability to cycle through contact types very easily. Talk about that one.
Well, you just have to highlight whatever contact, and this also applies to coils, that you want to change its type. So you highlight it with your mouse, you hit the space bar, and you cycle one by one with each click of the space bar through the different contact types. And it just goes around in a cycle. So if you decide you don't want to change it from a normally open, just hit it about 5, 6 times and you go back to normally open.
The other thing that's interesting in IEC is that you have more different contact types available to you than in the Horner Advanced Ladder, correct?
Correct. You do have your positive one shots and negative one shots on the contacts. And also, like some other IEC packages, you do not have to declare an extra variable to track the state of that contact that you want to use as a one shot.
Nice. Yeah, very nice. I can see that for sure. Okay, let's go on to the next point. An alternative way of selecting a function block that you want to use or want to drop into your logic, instead of necessarily picking it from the toolbox, John says, just add a function block, a generic function block, double click on that guy, and then choose your function block type that way.
Well, yes, I mean, you're not losing the project toolbox, but you just don't always have it visible. Put the empty function block in your logic, double click it, and the project toolbox appears. And then all your different categories of functions are there on the left-hand side. So you're not losing any functionality. It's just you get more screen real estate for your logic.
And that's especially important with laptops, right? I mean, we're always managing our screen real estate on our laptops. In our office systems, we probably have a couple different 24-inch monitors, so we got plenty of space. But on a laptop, you want to manage every square inch, I would imagine.
Correct.
Okay, here's another one. Another benefit. With the IEC ladder, you have no requirement for any kind of opening contact.
Right, and it's just makes your logic, creating logic easier because you don't always have to remember to add how many times have we seen that error message that it's illegal to do that because you can do that in so many packages, but you can't do that in the advanced ladder.
Right.
It just modernizes the ladder logic.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good point. And frankly, dropping the requirement for that contact before function blocks in advanced ladder is something we probably should definitely do anyway. Okay, another little benefit of kind of making things look the way you want in ladder is the ability to adjust the cell width and the cell height in ladder kind of infinitely.
Correct. So in standard advanced ladder, you just have normal view mode and wide mode. When you get into advanced ladder with variables, you now can zoom in, but it's only, you're just zooming in, making things slightly larger. You don't have the adjustable width. And so now this is just like Excel in the IEC that I just drag my column to whatever width I need.
Right, and it actually also, it's probably not quite as useful, but it also works to drag the height as well. Those can both be adjusted. This is pretty cool. This is something John pointed out to me that I hadn't really thought about, and that is the ability to add, a whole bunch of different operands to a single add instruction.
And this has always been a limitation of standard ladder, and not just in advanced ladder, but in other packages from the past, where when you needed to totalize several items, it was one add after another, and your result, A plus B equals C, you just kept adding to C, or adding to C and to your final bucket. And here in IEC, we can add up to 255 variables together.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. I definitely like that a lot. Okay, so another point on John's spreadsheet when it comes to ladder editing, he feels it's a lot easier to add parallel contacts in ladder.
Much easier because you have the one icon, you just keep clicking and you're adding one parallel contact after another, whereas in advanced ladder, you have to use the little vertical horizontal shunt tool to piece your logic together.
Agreed.
And how often have we not done the left side power rail properly and gotten an error?
Good point. Good point with that. So yeah, no question. And also if you want to parallel against a couple of, not just one contact, if you want to parallel across a couple different contacts, you highlight those, you hit the parallel button, and away you go. So yeah, very good point there for sure.
Now also, before we move on to string functions, it also applies to function blocks.
So you can parallel around the function blocks.
We have an icon there for parallel function blocks. So if you want to have 10 function blocks in parallel, you can.
Nice. Okay. Great case here. John's making a great case. All right, now let's talk about string handling, because there's no question that the number of string handling functions with IEC is extensive.
Very. And so you get more instructions, including create CRC. If anybody's ever written logic to create their own checksum, that's a tedious task. So the fact that you have a function for that is fantastic. We're going to get into it shortly, the structured text, but also when I can get into a string byte by byte and adjust the string that way or compare against it, that's also very powerful. But just these functions alone that I can use in ladder, anytime I have an application where I have to do anything with strings, I want IEC.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's talk about some of the debug capabilities that is available with Horner's IEC editor and Cscape that you may not find in some other IEC editors from some competitors there.
In standard advanced ladder, you normally have to have some watch windows created.
Right.
All the things that you want to monitor are not going to be right in front of you in your logic. And the beauty of the IEC variable list is that it goes live when you go into debug mode. So now you get to see the status of all your variables in the variable list. And again, you can sort it by the variable name, the memory address if you're using addresses, or the data type.
Nice. And also, I do recall us having a conversation. So I know in this screenshot here, we're showing, just some simple debugging of some ladder in addition to the program variable table. But also with Horner's IEC editor, if you've got some structured text you're monitoring in debug mode, you can see the status of all the variables in that structured text logic, which is nice.
Correct. And not all IEC packages do that. And that is one of the first things that caught my eye. The other line I sold at the time, with their structured text, you could only see the status of a variable if you put your mouse pointer over it. And when I saw that Horner had added the capability of seeing everything, all the variables, their status in structured text all at once, I was sold.
Awesome. Yeah, that does make a big difference for sure. Okay, now one of the big reasons, and I've talked about this before on the channel, and one of the big reasons people love IEC is because of the availability of structured text. And so John's got a whole series of points here on some real benefits of structured text. So we're going to kind of go through these one by one as well. So we'll start with comments.
Comments can be added anywhere. They can be above your code. They can be to the left of your code, to the right of your code. And that's particularly with the single line comments, but also you can use the multi-line and have what I'll call a paragraph of code and just have one comment for all of it. And you can mix and match and place them wherever you want to. So now you're just not limited to a comment above your rung of logic.
Yeah, so no excuses, people. Comment your code. For sure. Okay, this is an area I definitely agree with John, and that is value assignments in structured text are really, really easy.
Right. So, quite often on startup, you need to initialize a bunch of variables, or when you're, let's say, switching from auto to manual mode, you need to turn a lot of things off or reset them to 0. And, it's one move block after another in ladder logic. And structured text is just : equals 0, : equal whatever value you want to assign to it. And a thing a lot of people forget is you do not have to write structured text where each assignment is on its own line. I could have 4, 5, 6, 7 value assignments, values to variable assignments done in one line of text because the semicolon is the delimiter for that. So that's important in terms of assigning values to variables. But the other thing is that I can now hard code recipes and do my editing in Word or Excel and keep those, I also add them to my documentation when putting together a book for the program. But I have customers who go and change their recipes offline in Word and then just paste them back, into the Cscape program. They don't have to do their editing in Cscape.
Nice. And also the ability to build lookup tables probably is pretty powerful there.
Very powerful. And that's with the, between arrays, which were really the first thing in IEC. You now have that in advanced ladder with variables, but you did not have that in the original advanced ladder arrays, true arrays. And the fact now that I can do looping functions and go through these tables or arrays.
Nice. Okay, let's go through some of the unique structured text capabilities, some additional ones. Let's start with if statements.
Well, that's, if statements can be used in conjunction with the looping statements. Sometimes they're just good on their own. If this is this, then do something else, do something different. I would advise people, some people coming out of college like to do everything in structured text. So you can do a little bit too much structured text, and the latter is good for Boolean logic. I would not do too much Boolean logic with if statements because people end up nesting them a little too deep. But if you keep your if statements simple, life is good.
I agree. Yeah, no question. If statements are great, just don't go crazy with the nesting. All right, let's talk about for, some of the looping functions, starting with for.
There's basically three looping functions, and this is the first one, for, and this is the one I probably use the most because the one danger of any looping function is you forget that it doesn't get out of the loop. In a short matter of time, in a quarter second, you're going to turn on your watchdog timer and have a fatal fault. The system shuts down. So why I like the for statement or function is that you're specifying how long you're going to do it for. I'm going to do it from 1 to 10. And you don't have to specify the by, which is like, what's my increment by 1, by 2, by 3, whatever. If you don't put that in, it's going to do it by 1.
Right.
But I use this one the most.
Yeah, there's just no chance of getting an infinite loop here.
Correct.
Unlike the while function, which is powerful, but
if you if you're not careful with what you're doing while you're in the while, and you don't create a condition to get you out of the while, you'll be stuck there. But the while statement still has its purposes, and you just have to remember to sooner or later hit the while condition to turn it off.
Right. And if you set up a while condition, which is dependent on, let's say, an input, like a physical input, you're never going to meet that while statement because it's never going to go check the status of the input. It's going to be stuck in that while loop until it watchdogs.
Correct.
All right. Repeat.
Repeat really is similar to while. The while is while something is true. The repeat is do it until something is true. They're complementary to each other, just inverted in a way. And again, just hope that they're you get your until condition, because again you could be in an infinite loop. So that's why I stick with the for. But again, the while and the repeat have their places. Just be careful.
Very much. This is this interesting statement. Now, I've covered a lot of the things we've talked about. I've had different sessions on our live streams talking about some of these different structured text functions. I don't think I've ever covered the case statement, and it's a pretty functional one. Why don't you go through that one for us?
This is extremely handy. You can use this. Let's say you have a state machine, you're using state logic in your system, and based on you're looking at one variable, and that the value within that variable defines the state that you're in. You may want to use that because this would just go through that list until it finds the true condition for that variable. It will do the instructions that are there and then jump out of the case. So it can also be very, instead of, let's say I had in the case statement I had 100 conditions. Well, if I did this with ifs, it'd be 100 ifs. And even if I came across one of the ifs that was true, unless I had a jump that passed over the rest of the ifs, I'm still going to solve all the rest of the ifs. So scan time wise, this is the most efficient way to do a lot of comparisons against the same variable.
Awesome. Yeah, it's terrific. I agree. It could be really, really handy. Okay, so that's John's list. Okay, now I'm sure he's got more. And when we give him 6 more months, he's going to add more to the spreadsheet. But John, gosh, you made a really strong case here. You made me want to go fire up IEC and just start programming.
I have some work I could give you.
Maybe I'm not in such a hurry to do it after all. All right. Well, I really, really appreciate, first of all, I'm very impressed. You've made a really strong case for IEC. I love the list you put together. I think it's a great place for people to look to say, okay, is this right for me? And you've made a really strong case. So thanks for joining us today, John. I really appreciate it.
Oh, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, let's just demonstrate a few of the things that we talked about with John in terms of, why he likes the IEC editor. And we're just going to cover the ones from the ladder editor in IEC. So the first one he really liked, and it makes a lot of sense, is drag and drop. So I'm just going to go here to my program variable window and highlight this tag and just drop it here. And it's automatically creating a new rung with a normally open contact there. This is my motor run contact. I'm going to drag that there. Okay, I need to add a stop push button. So I'm going to do that here. Okay, Now, another thing John talked about was the fact that cycling through the different contact types is really convenient. So we've highlighted stop push button. I hit the space bar, and you can see it changed to a normally close. And if I keep cycling, it goes through the different types of contacts until I get back to the one I want. Another thing that we talked about was how easy it was to add a parallel contact or a whole bunch of parallel contacts. So I can press that button here. There's my parallel contact. And again, here's my drag and drop capability. Okay. Another thing we didn't really talk about, or another thing we did talk about that I haven't showed you yet, is the ability to stretch out your rung cells, your logic cells, to whatever size you want. Okay, so that can be pretty convenient if you want those a little bit bigger, for instance. Okay, and then let's talk about adding function blocks, or let's show you how to add function blocks. So I'm going to go create a new rung. I'm going to hit the function block button here to add a function block, and you'll notice we didn't have to put any kind of contact here. So no always on contact is required. That's nice and convenient. And then in terms of selecting our function block, let me make a little more room for myself here. In terms of selecting our function block, it just put a generic multiply block down. If we double click on the block, now we get this dialog that pops up where we can actually select what we want. And if we want just to add a few numbers together, we can go to the math category, select add, and then we can select how many of the, I guess, variables we want to add together. So we're going to add 4 variables together instead of just the standard 2. Okay, and then again, we can go back to our drag and drop. Oh, I got to click in the right spot here. Okay, so we're going to quickly add parts 1, parts 2. And I don't have to drag and drop, okay? It's not a requirement. I can do the normal way of just typing it in if I have it memorized, or I can use the pull down option as well. Okay, so again, those are a few of the things that we talked about with John, and I just wanted to highlight those. Specifically here, of course, we're talking about his tips for ladder in IEC. Okay, that's our material for today. This is where I remind you we're here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Whether we're fully live or pre-recorded, we've always got somebody standing by to answer any questions you might have. If you're watching live, give us those questions and comments in the chat section. If you're watching on replay, same thing except in the comment section, and we'll get back to you just as soon as we can. Okay, next year's training schedule is about to be posted, so keep checking our website at the address on the screen so you can get signed up early and get your spot reserved. Okay, lots of ways to interact with Horner online, on our website at hornerautomation.com, on our YouTube channel where you'll find this and hundreds of other videos, and on LinkedIn. Next week, we've got a great session for you. We're going to show you how you can control a variable frequency drive over RTU Modbus from a Horner OCS. Now, RTU Modbus is built into just about every drive out there, and it gives you all kinds of great information, including, fault information, speed feedback, current feedback, all kinds of stuff. You can even control the drive over that connection if you'd like. So it's going to be a good session next week, so don't forget to tune in. If you haven't done so already, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost anything. And if you choose to subscribe, you'll be notified every time we go live or every time we post a new video. Once again, many thanks to John Seymour from Shingle and Gibb for lending us his expertise today. Okay, until next week, let's get out there and do us some good.